The play is set in an East London bathhouse. The action revolves around 6 women who regularly frequent the baths.
The lovely thing is, the analogy is, as they take their clothes off, they start to unfold and their inhibitions start to disappear and they start to share their lives with each other.
The women are products of the rigid English class structure, but at the baths they're equal. They discuss their problems and try to resolve them. Actor Belinda Giblin believes the play's success over the past decade is due to its broad appeal.
For men, I think it's intriguing because it's probably equivalent to a bunch of men in a pub talking about women. Here they have, a bunch of women talking about men. And, it's fly on the wall time.
The 5-month tour of steaming begins tonight. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The SES predicts the Nemo will peak in the morning around the 5-metre mark. The town's caravan park has been evacuated as a precaution. Further downstream, the water has cut the road between Narrabri and Wee Waa at the Glencoe Channel. There's just 0.5 of a metre of water over the road, but roadworks on the crossing to make it flood-proof have made it unusable. Paddocks look more like rivers as the floodwater spills out of creeks and the Namoy River. The SES is now predicting a flood peak in Wee Waa of around 7.3 metres at noon on Friday. The town is likely to be isolated. Properties in the district will also be cut off for some time. Meantime, Corindi was placed on a flood alert overnight after a storm over Sugarloaf Mountain dumped 175 millimetres of rain in half an hour. SES officials issued a warning for a major flood in Jacobs and Josephs Creek and Corindi. Luckily for the township, the rain fell only in an isolated area, with the floodwaters causing no problems, apart from cutting low-lying roads. Heavy earth-moving equipment was also called in to move piles of debris washed downstream by the stormwater.
Well, she started ballet actually as a very small girl and then gave it away, and then she took it up again at 8 years old. She went to Robin Turner Ballet School in Newcastle. From then on she ended up going to Rosella Hightower in France, and then she was accepted into a company called Red Notes in Paris.
Then Rebecca took the Winter Olympics by storm after attracting the attention of leading French choreographer Philippe Decoufflé.
She started dancing with him and then she moved into the choreography. So she was mainly responsible for the flag, which was the finale to the Winter Olympics.
Mother June, Sister Penny and the rest of the family farewelled Rebecca at 16. Trained extensively in classical ballet, she has come to love modern dance, introduced to her by Penny.
Whatever I did, she just understood exactly what I meant. I found it very easy to teach her because she knew exactly what I was talking about.
We're really proud of her. we really are.
Great.
It's really good.
Debts is about greed. It focuses on the success and failure of entrepreneurs during the 70s and 80s. Writer and director Steffo Nansu says the game Monopoly forms a backdrop for the action.
Debts is a play about their journey around the board as they acquire their power and as they rise or fall according to how they play the game.
The Adelaide Festival is held every 2 years. It's a national stage which offers performers and writers valuable exposure. Critics from across the country will be in Adelaide next month and they'll have a chance to review the play Debts.
It's an opportunity for our work to be recognised by other states, other audiences and other promoters.
Newcastle audiences can see the play before it goes to Adelaide. It'll be staged at the Civic Playhouse next Monday and Tuesday. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
This is one nightmare Newcastle hasn't experienced, but some believe it's just the kind of disaster that an ageing city can expect unless fire safety regulations are dramatically tightened. Spot checks by Newcastle City Council inspectors have revealed serious fire safety breaches in a number of public buildings.
We've actually found locked exit doors, which means that in case of emergency, people who automatically go to use them can't get out. Apart from the panic, people are crushed to death, and you hope it never happens, but the potential is there, and we don't want it to happen in Newcastle.
Council is sifting through applications for 2 new positions, health and building inspectors who will specialise in fire safety. Health and building surveyor Harold Stewart says the first target will be hotels, motels and shopping malls, where crowds would have little chance of survival. The fire safety enforcement will be preceded by a series of public workshops involving everyone from architects to hotel proprietors. Proprietors of older buildings won't be expected to rigidly adhere to modern building codes, but new projects will have to meet high standards.
We have to ensure that in the case of a fire or emergency, people can get out, and that's the main aim.
Details of the fire safety enforcement will be presented at next month's council meeting and should be introduced from April. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
Gosford has had several major floods during the past decade, and one resident says each year they've worsened.
Every year that we've flooded, the levels have just got higher and higher.
Today, Mr Holstein and neighbours were still working through the weekend's devastation. Attempting to avoid scenarios like this, 2 years ago the Gosford City Council adopted a flood management plan costing $54 million over 5 years. It requires equal contributions of $3.6 million a year from local, state and federal governments. Council raised its quota through a drainage levy. These funds have already been used on various sites. Recent work carried out in the Umina area proved very timely. During the floods of 89 and 90, this creek overflowed. The neighbouring houses were waterlogged. This year, that didn't happen. Council attributes this to flood work it carried out at its own expense. $600,000 was spent widening and deepening this creek to increase drainage. A similar amount is earmarked to build a wider bridge downstream of the creek to alleviate further flooding. Other areas weren't so lucky. Flood works here rely on joint government funding.
It's really the state and the federal government that needs to continue to give us the necessary money.
Mayor Bell says to date, Council has received less than $2 million from state and federal government. According to the agreement, Council should have received $8 million.
2 years ago they agreed that they would fulfil their commitments, but they haven't come through with it. This time they have to.
He says things have reached crisis point. As a result, he's planning a deputation to the Premier and Prime Minister within the next few weeks. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
That's right, chocolates are old hat. Bloomers are in, and we're not talking about roses either. No, we're talking about lingerie. That's right, this week shops stocking women's underwear, pardon the pun, have played host to scores of blushing beaus looking for the ultimate in intimate apparel. But let's face it, who's it really for? Louise says it's a double-edged sword. But how do other people see this romantic day? What does Valentine's Day mean to you?
Nothing. I hate Valentine's Day.
Why?
Because no one loves me.
No flowers?
No.
No chocolates?
No.
No lingerie?
No, nothing.
No flowers, no jewellery, no diamonds.
Well, important for people that are in love, but other than that, I wouldn't know.
No, it just means giving roses and having to fork out a lot of money.
That's really cynical. So what are you going to get, you reckon?
Probably a couple of roses, I'd say.
Yeah? You thought about lingerie?
No, she's got plenty of that. She just invested in a whole heap of it.
Well, and those without a Valentine, well, they could console themselves with a heart-shaped donut. Or 4.
It's an intimate day. It's nice. There's a lot of doom and gloom around, and it's nice to see, you know, that there's still a lot of love out there.
Lots of love. Anthony Griffiths, NBN News.
Acting on information, police from Mayfield and Newcastle discovered the backyard crop at a Georgetown address.
They were located growing along a fence, and there was 4 plants. They'd grown to quite a height which would have protruded over the fence. So persons have attempted to conceal them by pulling the branches down and securing bandages to stakes in the ground which lowered the height of the plants.
Inside the house, police say they found branches hung to dry in a cupboard and dried packaged leaves in a drawer. The overall street value of the haul is estimated at close to $10,000. A 47-year-old woman has been bailed to appear in court on March the 13th. The show saw its biggest roll-up yet, with enthusiasts of all brands and persuasions rallying to look over the Latins. Co-organiser Christine Craven is the proud owner of a 250cc Benelli. She says the bikes have a character all of their own.
Looks and sound and colour and personality.
Vintage and current models were on display, including the first Ducati Road Racer, a modified push bike, and alongside the latest $80,000 racing superbike. Organisers had made space for non-Italian parking, and no matter how much the opposition dressed up, the Latins held centre stage. Miners and mining communities stick together and they don't forget. There's little left of the Burwood Colliery. The pit whistle fell silent for the last time in 1982. The shafts were capped, sealing in 100 years of toil and tragedy. 48 miners lost their lives in the pit over the years. Today, some of their descendants, workmates, former managers and superintendents gathered in their memory. A plaque inscribed with the names of the dead was unveiled at the Burwood Colliery Bowling Club, just over the road from the old mine. The memory of the miners will live on in the club, but the old mine site is now a real estate development. Doug Graham worked in the pit. His father died there.
There's a new breed of person shifting into this area, but the old people all around Newcastle, it's a big thing. The number of people here today, must be 100 people inside commemorating their deaths.
In Hamilton, the Greek Orthodox community gathered to welcome the primate of their church, Archbishop Stykianis. It's been 3 years since he last visited and the faithful came to worship for the 3-hour service. The Greek Orthodox Church has a following of 1 million people in Australia, and during the service a special collection was taken up for the faithful in Russia, facing drastic food shortages during the winter. Fishing once seemed to be a pastime where you could get away from it all, but now conscience over resource preservation, state and federal authorities are all tugging on the line. Commercial fishermen are already heavily regulated by the New South Wales fisheries, and for a while that has let the amateurs off the hook. Where bag limits already apply, they could now be tightened. A catch of rock blackfish could be limited to 5, tailor to 20 and flathead to 10. Crab, lobster and some shellfish catches could be reduced, traps and tackle limited. The New South Wales Recreational Fishing Federation is still a small fish in the scheme of things, but it's urging anglers to voice their say on issues before legislations are imposed.
They own it. It's time those people got off their butts, realised it was a resource that belonged to the public and had a strong say in how it should be managed.
A meeting discussing bag limits will be held at the Cardiff Workers Club at 7 o'clock on Wednesday night.
The Hunter Area Health Service now leases the state government-owned building in Scott Street at a cost of $25,000 a year. Voluntary community operations, including the Pensioners Advisory Service, Parents Without Partners and the Psychiatric Rehabilitation Association also occupy the premises rent-free. Their dilemma is that Hunter Area Health is moving out and will stop paying the lease this December. The voluntary services can't afford to stay, and with public health and other support facilities close by, moving is also unfavourable.
We deal with a lot of elderly, frail, aged people, and they must have those facilities available.
The organisation services around 7,000 people a year.
Many of them who don't seem to be able to get the necessary information from other sources, not because the information isn't available, but because many elderly people have a fear of dealing with the government departments.
State member for Newcastle, Bryce Gaudry, is calling on state government to maintain the building and allow the organisations to stay rent-free.
I'm sure it's a good investment because the cost would be far greater if the clients from this service were in institutions or in the hospitals.
Mr Gaudry intends writing to the Premier this week to outline his plan.
Thieves kicked in the front door of this Italian restaurant before light this morning, ransacking the till and taking a small quantity of cash. It's thought the same people were responsible for a similar robbery overnight at this hairdresser's. The businesses are the latest in a string of break-ins. Almost every shop on the street has been robbed in a similar manner over the past fortnight. In some cases, they've been the victims of repeat offences. Police have increased patrols in the neighbourhood to protect not only premises but parked cars, which are increasingly targeted by thieves. The operation has had some results.
We have had a bit of success where an adult male was arrested for break-in and steal in that area and subsequently was charged with a number of break-in and steal offences. We hope as a result of this operation that we will get further arrests and stem this tide of crime.
Meanwhile, police are asking business operators to take extra precautions, removing money from their premises overnight and upgrading locks. At Mayfield, detectives are investigating a suspicious fire at a clothing shop overnight. The blaze extensively damaged Rosemary's clothing store on the corner of Maitland Road and Kerr Street. Although there was no sign of forced entry, police are appealing for witnesses who may have seen people acting suspiciously around the building shortly before midnight. Tom Hilston, NBN News. Guninan's Tangara passenger trains are a familiar sight on Sydney's inner-city runs where they've performed without problems. Now the manufacturers want to export that success to Europe. The Danish Transport Authority has been looking to upgrade passenger services for a number of years. The Tangara is very similar to the style of people mover they want. Guninan's Railway Products General Manager Michael Hayes today unveiled the concept they hope to build for the Danes. The train must be stylish and fast with an ability to carry high passenger volumes in comfort. The tender calls for 12 train sets to be built by 1995, the first couple on the tracks by the end of next year. Mr Hayes says Guninan's record of reliable production will give them the edge.
We believe our capability of supplying trains in a very short period of time will be of considerable interest.
If Guninan's win the contract, valued at about $150 million, it will open the way to a second construction stage over about a decade, which could be worth $1.2 billion. Mr Hayes says the company is seeking a European partner for the long-term venture, but Australia will still benefit.
In the past, a lot of our technology has come to us, say, from the USA through technology transfer, and I think it's been a very healthy thing. And I think the transfer of Australian technology over to Europe will also be very healthy.
The Danish Transport Authority is expected to announce its decision next month. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
Senator Sawada is here to look at industry on a grassroots level. With the Democrats currently formulating their industrial policies, she believes a first-hand look is vitally important. Equally as important as is Newcastle's industrial contribution to the nation's economy.
It's a gateway port for a lot of our primary products, especially coal, and really a city like Newcastle that's not functioning properly has a tremendous impact on the economic health of the whole nation.
The ill-functioning economy has seen widespread industry cutbacks, with BHP no exception. Senator Sawada believes it's probably inevitable the big Australian will become a mini-mill and believes greater consultation between the company, employees and community is imperative.
It is important that they recognise the social and economic importance that the plant has to Novocastrians and also the effect on morale.
The Senator says Newcastle is long overdue for increased government support.
They've been involved in progressively reducing tariffs over a wide range of industries for the last 5 years, and that's cruelled manufacturing in Newcastle. If it wants to see a city like Newcastle recover, must provide some kind of industry assistance by way of tax incentives, increased depreciation allowances for investment in new plant and equipment.
To further foster Australian talents, Senator Sawada wants a national development centre established,
which would channel funds from government and superannuation funds into commercialisation of Australian technology and the products of Australian inventors.
This, she says, would help to stop the drift of Australian talent overseas in search of funding.
Humid conditions will test the ardent triathlon fan with 3 big events to be held. At Trail Bay Jail Seal Rocks, a junior event for 7s to 14s will be held tomorrow, and then on Sunday the Open Division over a longer course will chase a part of the $3,500 worth of prizes. Also, swimming, cycling and running athletes from all over the state will take part in the Festival of Port Stephens Triathlon over a flat course that will be conducive to quick times. A slower pace at the Stockton RSL, where the final 2 days competition in the Newcastle Snooker Classic will be contested. Restricted to Newcastle amateurs and professionals only, the tournament has grown in stature over the past couple of years and is now of a very high standard. Again, plenty of cash is up for grabs, around $5,500. And as a lead up to the World Titles to be held in Newcastle during August, the Hunter Valley Martial Arts Club are holding a major championship at West Wallsend High School on Sunday. Shooto-Roo style will be featured, with many combatants prime candidates to make the Australian team for the upcoming World Championships.
The pilot was flying his Tamair twin-engine Cessna on a regular morning mail run from Sydney to Scone, but around 8 o'clock, 15 kilometres west of Muswellbrook, something went wrong.
Just a huge explosion, that's all. Thought it was lightning striking a big tree or something, but then just saw the flames.
Aircraft wreckage was scattered throughout the bush, so much so that rescue workers were unable to identify the make or type of craft. The plane hit just metres under the summit of what's known as Castle Rock. The 200-metre high rock is a well-known local landmark, but early this morning it was shrouded in mist.
At that time of the morning it would have been very hard, low visibility, and would have been very hard to see.
Civil aviation authorities have begun an investigation. Newcastle Scientific Police photographed the site from the NBN chopper. News of the crash has devastated people who worked with the young pilot.
My kids, idolised him. He used to come up every day and I'd take him back to the plane each night. And as he left us last night, my kids just happened to say he's the best bloke that's ever been up here.
Peter Ryan, NBN News.
AIDS can be transmitted when a drug user who carries the virus shares a needle with another user. To reduce the spread of HIV, needle exchange programs have been established. Injecting drug users are encouraged to return their used needles here, where they're disposed of properly. They're given clean fits, as they're known, at no charge. Now it seems the demand for this service has spread to Newcastle University. Used needles have been found discarded on campus. President of the Student Representative Council, Matthew Cantrill, estimates about 50 uni students use IV drugs. He denies that a needle exchange program would legitimise illicit drug use.
It's there. If you keep saying it doesn't happen and don't support it and don't try and help those people, it's not going to stop. It's not going to go away. It's not going to suddenly disappear. And we're just going to have a lot more AIDS-infected people floating around the campus than we would have otherwise.
Professor Rob Sanson-Fisher, Director of Disease Prevention with the Area Health Service, says there is a need to supply needle exchange programs for drug users. However, where they should be located depends on the demand. He says at this stage he has no accurate information about how many uni students are sharing needles and if they can get access to existing services. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The Newcastle and its recently commissioned sister ship, the HMAS Melbourne, are the drought breakers in a 20-year dry spell of Australian naval shipbuilding. Newcastle complements the Navy's current generation of American-designed and built guided missile frigates, Adelaide, Canberra, Sydney and Darwin, used in Australia's Gulf War contingent. The Newcastle is the second vessel to be launched from Williamstown since shipbuilder Amacon purchased the site from the federal government in 1988. Part of the deal was the completion of 2 frigates for $404 million.
We have introduced very substantial modular construction techniques whereby we built around about half of the hull in large sections in Newcastle and we built the complete superstructure in Adelaide. We very largely pre-outfitted these sections, and that led us to substantial improvements in productivity.
To speed up the work, Amacon shared the job with Eglo Engineering in Newcastle. Major hull sections were built and fitted out at the Kooragang plant, then barged to Melbourne. The process has proven successful and will be a feature of Amacon's $4 billion Anzac ship contract to supply the Navy with 10 German-designed Mako 200 frigates over the next 10 years. Newcastle is vying for some of that work.
Our primary preferences to do this work are in Newcastle and New Zealand. We've therefore put out tenders recently, 2 companies in both Newcastle and New Zealand. We're getting responses back very shortly, and we'll be evaluating those tenders over the next 6 months or so. The outcome of where that work finally goes between New Zealand, Newcastle, or possibly other states in Australia will depend on the tenders, the prices, the ability of the companies to demonstrate that they can do the work.
Fighting ships named Newcastle have served the Royal Navy for 2 centuries. Now all seems ready for this ship to continue that tradition with the Royal Australian Navy. Newcastle's Lady Mayoress Margaret McNaughton will send the 2,500-tonne ship on its way. It's 70% complete and should be ready for commissioning into the Royal Australian Navy in late 1993. Andrew Lobb reporting for NBN News in Melbourne.